In 1828, a king in southern Africa commanded an army so powerful that British colonizers called him the Black Napoleon. His warriors could run nearly 50 miles barefoot in a single day and were experts with weapons he personally engineered. But what history often tries to hide is the deeper truth. This king built one of the most sophisticated military systems in African history. And for 2 centuries, the West has attempted to erase the real reason he became so ruthlessly effective. This is the true story of Shaka Zulu. Let's travel back to southern Africa in the early 1800s. The entire region was a chaotic landscape of rival chiefdoms, constantly shifting alliances, and endless warfare. Into this turbulent world, a boy named Shaka was born. He was the son of a Zulu princess, Nandi, and a minor chief who rejected him. Cast out with his mother, Shaka's childhood was one of hardship, spent on the run from one place to another. But this suffering didn't break him. It forget him. Every betrayal he faced, every battle he witnessed, sharpened a mind that became obsessed with power, order, and above all, survival. He found refuge and opportunity within the powerful Methothea kingdom. It was here, under the mentorship of the great chief Dingiswayo, that Shaka began his transformation from a scorned outcast into a military prodigy. He wasn't just a good warrior, he was a revolutionary thinker. He studied the art of war with an intensity no one had ever seen. He observed the weaknesses in traditional fighting styles so long, flimsy throwing spears that were often wasted, the disorganized charges that left warriors vulnerable. He saw a path to something greater, something more disciplined and deadly. Shaka's rise through the Menthethwa ranks was nothing short of meteoric. His skill and strategic mind were undeniable. But his true moment arrived when his mentor Dingiswayo was captured and killed by a rival chief. In the power vacuum that followed, Shaka didn't just step up, he seized control. He returned to his own people, the Zulu, who at the time were just a small, insignificant clan. But under his command, they were about to become a war machine the world had never seen. The first thing Shaka did was completely overhaul Zulu weaponry. He scrapped the traditional long, throwing spear, which was designed to be thrown from a distance and then discarded. He replaced it with a short, broad-bladed stabbing spear called the Ik. The name was onomatopoeic, meant to imitate the sound it made when it was pulled from an enemy's chest. This wasn't just a new weapon. It was a new philosophy of warfare. It forced his warriors into close quarters, disciplined combat, turning battles from chaotic skirmishes into brutal, decisive encounters. But new weapons were only the beginning. Shaka revolutionized battlefield tactics. He organized his army into tight, disciplined regiments, known as Amabutho. Based on age groups, this created an incredible sense of brotherhood and loyalty within the ranks. He then developed his most famous military strategy, the bullhorns formation, or impi. The main force, the chest, would engage the enemy head-on, while 2 flanking horns would encircle and trap them, and a reserve force, the loins, would wait behind to be deployed wherever they were needed most. This formation, combined with the devastating power of the Aikua, was virtually unstoppable. His soldiers didn't just march to war, they ran. Shaka implemented a brutal training regimen. Warriors were forced to run 4 miles every day, often barefoot over rough and thorny terrain, until their feet became as tough as leather. He discarded sandals, arguing they slowed his men down. This training produced soldiers with unparalleled speed, stamina, and endurance. They could cover vast distances in a single day, surprising enemies who never expected them to arrive so quickly. Discipline was absolute. Cowardice was punishable by death. This forged an army that was not only physically superior but also psychologically unbreakable. Under Shaka's command, the Zulu kingdom expanded with breathtaking speed. One by one, neighboring villages fell. Chiefdoms collapsed, and terrified populations either fled in what became known as the Mafekana crushing or were absorbed into his rapidly growing empire. Shaka wasn't simply a conqueror driven by bloodlust. He was a brilliant state builder. He unified fragmented groups, centralizing power under his absolute authority. He imposed a common identity in a rigid social structure that turned a collection of scattered clans into a powerful, unified Zulu nation. By 1828, The Zulu kingdom had become one of the most formidable states on the entire African continent, its influence stretching across southern Africa. But the same ruthlessness that built Shaka's empire also planted the seeds of his downfall. His rule became increasingly tyrannical. The pivotal moment came with the death of his mother, Nandi, the one person he truly loved and who had stood by him through everything. His grief was colossal, and he plunged the entire kingdom into it with him. He imposed bizarre and extreme mourning rituals. No crops could be planted. No milk could be consumed. Any person found to be insufficiently mournful could be executed on the spot. Thousands were killed during this period of forced grief. His paranoia grew, and his actions became more erratic. Even his most loyal commanders and family members began to fear him. The kingdom, which had been built on discipline and strength, was now straining under the weight of its leader's grief and cruelty. The breaking point came in September of 1828. His own half-brothers, Dingan and Mailangina, who had long conspired against him, saw their chance. They ambushed Shaka and assassinated him, ending the reign of a man whose shadow still looms large over African history. But the story doesn't end with his death. For generations that followed, European colonizers, particularly the British, systematically distorted his legacy. They painted Shaka as a one-dimensional, bloodthirsty barbarian. This narrative served a clear purpose. It justified their own colonial ambitions and their violent conquest of southern Africa. If Shaka was just a savage, then their invasion could be framed as a civilizing mission. What they rarely, if ever, acknowledged was their profound fear not of Shaka's savagery, but of his brilliance. Shaka had built an African military state that was so advanced, so efficient, and so disciplined that it rivaled their own. In fact, British officers who later fought the Zulu army were astonished by their tactics and organization. They studied his methods. Shaka Sempi, formation, and his logistical genius forced the Western world to confront a truth it desperately wanted to ignore: that African power, African strategy, and African leadership could not only meet, but eclipse European expectations. Shaka Zulu did not simply rule by force. He was a visionary who reshaped a continent. He forged a nation, revolutionized warfare, and created an empire that stood as a testament to African ingenuity and strength. The echoes of his legacy's innovations, his unification, and his ultimate defiance of a simplistic historical narrative continue to resonate powerfully today, reminding us of the complex and brilliant king behind the legend. Thank you for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more hidden histories. We'll see you next time.